So thanks for all of that. Tonight, let me just kind of get a poll. How many of you have seen this movie, Inside Out? A few of you. Okay, good. If you haven't, I'm going to be going through pretty much the whole plot line as I'm going through here. We're actually going to kind of talk through the movie, and then I'm going to pull out some things from the movie that I believe that we can glean from on this. So let's get started right away. Let me say first off, this is a cartoon. But, and I think Pixar figured this out when it wasn't really a huge success. This is really not a kid's movie. If you've seen it, it's really not. I mean, Casey kind of sort of watched it sort of with me, but he kind of lost interest in it. It's much deeper, I think, than what kids can really understand. There are definitely some parts that kids might think are funny, and there were a few places where Casey was laughing uncontrollably, but I think that was just because... Yeah, he just does that sometimes. So, it's really a little bit beyond their grasp because it's really all about emotions. It's all about the emotions that we go through. And, kids kind of sort of get that, but not so much. I think once you get to be about the age of the main character in the movie, I think you can probably start to understand it. I've heard some teenagers say that they've really liked it. So let me just kind of give you an update for those of you who haven't seen it. This story is told through the eyes of the 5 emotions that are in Riley, the main character, a little girl who we see at the very beginning as being a baby, but then the bulk of the story is when she's about 11. It's told through the eyes of the emotions that live inside her head, the emotions that are in the control center of her head. And so, whoops, sorry, I hit that button too quick. So just in case you haven't seen it, let me go ahead and show you a clip that introduces these 5 emotions, and I'm going to play with the volume here. All right, so those are the 5 emotions that we're going to be talking about a little bit, the voices inside Riley's head, and just a recap, here they are. There's joy that you met right off the very bat, first one in. Then comes sadness, then fear, then disgust, and the last one is anger. Now, I think it's very interesting the way that the movie portrays each of these, because if you'll notice, the movie really portrays these in their very positive state. Each of these emotions have got a positive or a negative. And so the anger, what Joy says, the narrator in this part of the movie, anger is very concerned about fairness. He wants to make sure that everything's fair. He's concerned about justice. He's making sure that everything is working well for Riley and no one takes advantage of her. And so he's very concerned about fairness, which is a very positive side of anger. Of course, we know there's a negative side to anger as well. Same thing with disgust. She's described as keeping Riley from being poisoned, both physically and socially. But again, disgust has kind of a negative side as well. We've seen that. Check out Facebook if you want to know what that looks like. So, so disgust has a good side and a negative side. Fear, I thought it's very interesting the way they describe fear. Fear is in charge of keeping Riley safe, but we also know that fear can have a negative side as well. Fear can cripple us. Fear can paralyze us. It can keep us from really living out our lives. And then I'm going to skip to Joy. Joy makes Riley happy. That's Joy's job. That's what she sees as her main purpose. And then the interesting thing, and this is what we're going to be focused on for the most part tonight, is the statement that Joy makes, and that is she doesn't really know what sadness does. She really doesn't know what sadness does, but there's nowhere else for her to go. Oops, I'm dropping money. Joy is checked, and so there's nowhere else for sadness to go, so she's just in there with all the rest of them. And so this really is the question that this movie is trying to answer, and it's also something that we're going to look at the end of going through the movie. We're going to try to answer that on a biblical standpoint. What is the role of sadness in our lives? Should we be sad? Is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? What is the role of sadness? Now, you also learned in that clip that each time Riley forms a memory, an orb, the color of that particular emotion, each of these emotions have a color, and every time she forms a memory, one of these orbs comes down the little chute, and the color of the feeling appears. So gold is joy, and red is anger, and purple is fear, and green is disgust, and sadness is blue, right? Okay, so it appears down the chute, and it goes into these memory banks of Riley. Now, very powerful memories become her core memories. She has a center, and if you watch the whole movie, they talk about this more. She has a center of her core memories, those memories that really are forming her opinion of herself and who she is and her personality. You might be thinking to yourself, what are my core values or my core memories? You may have some that have made a huge impact on your life, either for the positive or the negative. And so Riley, over the years, has developed some core memories that have kind of developed who she is. She has core memories of just being silly. And so she's got a silly island where it's just her, and the core memory is her just being silly with her family. And she's got the core memory of family, all these memories of her spending time with her family. And she's got core memories of playing hockey. It's something that she loves to do. And I'm probably leaving out some, but I think there's 4 or 5 other, I don't know. And so you'll have to watch the movie. That's what you got to do. So anyway, they become her core memories. Those are the things that she's kind of built on. And those memories stay up in headquarters, and they're very well protected. And the interesting thing is, at this point in the movie, they've all been positive. They're all gold color. They're all happy memories. They're all very positive. All of her memories have been very joyful. But Riley's world gets turned upside down when she turns 11. Her family relocates. They've been living in Minnesota, and all of her memories are of Minnesota. And then she moves to San Francisco. Now, I don't know if you've been to either Minnesota or San Francisco. Not the same thing. I mean, come on. It's not at all the same thing. And so Riley's world just gets completely turned upside down. You're going to graduate school in San Francisco. All right. And it's very different than Farmington, but I think you're going to be okay. I think you're going to be just fine. Yeah, I'm not worried. I'm not worried about your world getting turned upside down. It's good. So they relocate to San Francisco, and everything changes. Now, she's also, I think it's important to note, and they don't talk about this much in the movie, but puberty starting to hit. You know, things get a little bit crazy, get a little bit mixed up when puberty starts to hit. 11. I remember when my sister turned 11. We were in Brazil at the time. Oh my gosh, talk about world being turned upside down. Not just the fact that we were living in a foreign country. My sister was a terror, which is why we had to leave Brazil, which really disappointed me because I loved it. But yeah, Sherry's world, she reminds me a lot of Riley in this movie. Because that's exactly what happened to her. We relocated to Brazil, and she was about 11. She was about to turn 12, and it was bad. It was bad. So Riley's world gets turned upside down. And the thing that gets complicated in the control center is Sadness keeps touching things. Sadness, who Joy would like to just be able to keep in a circle. At one point, she draws a little circle on the floor and says, "Stay here. Don't touch anything. Don't move. Here's your job. Stay right here. Don't touch anything." But Sadness keeps touching things. And things that were happy are starting to become sad. And Sadness is starting to play a much bigger role in Riley's life. And at this point, nothing's going right. Nothing's going right for Riley. Joy is very hard to find because nothing is going right. So watch this clip to kind of see what's going on in Riley's life at this point. All right, so there's a lot of pressure on Riley to be happy. She's getting it from her mom that, yes, everything's going wrong and everything's really difficult, but then here comes Mom to say, "Thank you for being our happy girl. Thank you for staying happy in the midst of all of this stuff." And so where Joy was about to start taking a back seat, now she's back in control, trying to make everybody happy. But Riley's not happy. She's not happy. And her emotions start to lose control. And again, puberty is part of that as well. But she starts to lose control. And in the scene that we just left off on, she's about to have a dream. She's about to have a really bad dream because she's not happy. And she can't fake it. And so it's coming out in her dreams. And so as these emotions start losing control, chaos ensues. And Joy, Sadness, and Riley's, and her core memories, by the way. Sadness starts to touch those core memories, which Joy just can't handle. And in trying to protect those memories, Joy and Sadness and the core memories all end up out of the control center and down into the maze that is Riley's long-term memory. And so along the way, as they're trying to get themselves back to the control center, because Joy feels like she needs to be so much in control, they run into Bing Bong, who is Riley's childhood imaginary friend. Anyone have an imaginary friend when they were kids? Yeah, most of us probably did, whether you want to, if you want to admit it or not, or if you remember it or not. Because you see, here's the thing. Bing Bong has some ideas about getting back. He knows his way around long-term memory. And so he has some ideas about getting Joy and Sadness back to headquarters. But as they're going along, the problem is that Bing Bong is dealing with being forgotten. Much like some of you really quickly remembered your childhood friend, some of you were sitting there back going, well, yeah, I think, but I haven't thought about that in so long. Maybe you don't really remember that much about it, especially as much as you remembered about it when you were a kid. And so Bing Bong is dealing with being forgotten. And we're about to watch a scene where some of his stuff is being dumped into the memory dump. And something that was very important to him and Riley is being dumped into the memory dump, and this is at this point where Joy gets a little bit of a wake-up call. So watch this. So what happened there is that one of Riley's core memories, Joy realizes she had been so focused on the joy of that memory, she didn't really remember, she didn't really understand that it had been caused by sadness, that something sad had happened to Riley, and because of that, her parents and her teammates responded to her that brought joy into her life. And so Joy comes to an understanding that sadness has indeed played a part and a role in Riley's emotions and personality, which is a real, eye-opening experience for her. But meanwhile, the other emotions are up in control center, and they're taking drastic measures. Without Joy there, everything, again, has just spun out of control, and anger has convinced Riley that what she needs to do in order to fix this situation is she needs to run away. She needs to run away and go back to Minnesota because that's where she was happy. And so they've convinced her that she needs to run, that she needs to just go. So she does. She starts to get on a bus to run away. And Joy and Sadness get back to the control room just as Riley is about to run away, and Joy and Sadness are going to save the day. But it happens in a way that was very surprising to the rest of the emotions. So this is a little bit longer of a clip, and then we'll get to breaking this thing down. So this is how this all ends. So a new core memory. And Sadness is shocked when Joy sends her in to save the day. She's so used to Joy being the one who saves the day, but Joy sends Sadness in to save the day. It was Sadness that prompted Riley to go home. And so, she had to have the sadness in order to experience the new joy of being with her family. And did you notice a new multicolored emotion came out? Because when we're kids, things can be kind of black and white and simple, but as we get older, things get a little more complicated, and there's a lot more emotions that we deal with. And so this new multicolored memory becomes part of Riley's core memories, and she develops more and more core memories as she's going along, and everything ends happy. And as you can see, it's not a kid's movie, right? I saw a couple of you mamas out there, and that was the point in the movie where Casey totally checked out. He was like, what? And it's probably just because I was sick when I watched it, but I was a little bit like, oh my God. Yeah, it's just because I was sick. Anyway, so what does this all have to do with me? What does this have to do with us? Well, here's the thing. We are emotional beings created in the image of an emotional God. And, a lot of times when it comes to emotions, we're kind of like, what is this all about? What is the deal here with emotions? But here are the facts, folks, that we find each and every one of Riley's emotions in the Old Testament with God, and in the New Testament with Jesus. We find these emotions. I mean, just think about Jesus. It's a little bit easier to think about seeing these emotions in his life. He definitely experiences joy. He experiences joy. Think about sometimes when he experiences joy. He experiences joy when his disciples get it. He experiences joy when he sees them going out and doing the things that he's been doing. He experiences joy when the little children come to him. There are even parts in the New Testament where we see humor in Jesus, right? So he definitely experiences joy. He also experiences sadness, doesn't he? Tomorrow morning I'm going to be preaching about the death of Lazarus. Jesus experienced sadness. He experienced fear. Remember the garden? He experiences fear. And he experiences disgust pretty much every time he has some kind of encounter with the Pharisees. He's pretty much disgusted with them, and so he experiences disgust. He experiences all these same emotions that Riley does. And so if Jesus has those, and we're created in his image, then yeah, we're going to have them too. We're going to have those too, and so we can't hide from those. And the whole time I was working on this sermon, I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of one of those people that hides my emotions quite a bit, and so I'm just like, okay, wait a minute. Maybe I need to lighten up a little bit. Oh, something just happened. I must have just gotten... that was God saying, yes, Melinda. Amen. Thanks, God. So yeah, thanks Kenny for pointing that out. Yeah, prophet in my life right there, more times than once. So we shouldn't be surprised that we've got these emotions. But the thing about Jesus and his emotions, notice he had the positive side of all those emotions. He didn't let fear paralyze him. He didn't let anger, although he did have anger. I didn't mention that one, when he turned over the tables in the temple and things like that. He didn't let these fears get the better of him. He chose the positive side of all these fears. So that's one thing we need to remember, is that these emotions are from God. They are who he is as well as who we are. And the emotions have to have value. They have value in their balance. It's the things that balance them out, the good sides of these emotions, that give them value. And I really want to make the case, like in the movie, I want to make the case for sadness in our lives. In just these few moments, man, we watched a lot of movie there, and so I've got to hustle. But yeah, I want to make the case for sadness in our lives. I think there's a role for sadness. And we live in a world that says, put on a happy face. We live in a world that constantly encourages us to be happy at all costs. There are all sorts of things. I mean, anytime you turn on the television, you see commercial after commercial after commercial trying to sell you things to make you happy, to make you like yourself more, to make you joyful, to make you, and really it's all a lie. But you don't see a whole lot of things on TV that are trying to sell you things that make you sad, right? That you don't see those kind of things. But yet, I think that there's a place for sadness, just like what this movie says. Joy figures out what sadness's role is in Riley's life. And I think there's a role for it in our life as well. So remember this little passage from Ecclesiastes. There's a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. And one of the things that's listed there, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. It's one of those things that our lives have got to have that balance. We can't be happy all the time. There are going to be times when we're going to be sad. There are going to be times when we're going to weep. There are going to be times when we mourn. And I think that's important for us to remember, that there's this balance in life. There's a time and a season for everything. Another thing about sadness is it gives us an opportunity to build community. Sadness gives us an opportunity to build community. And I think the unfortunate truth is that we mask our emotions at church more so than most places. That we come to church and what happens? People ask you, hey, how you doing? What's your answer? Okay. Good. Hey, I'm awesome. Is that true all the time? No, it's not. And so a lot of times at church is the place where we're trying to mask our sadness and trying to pretend that everything's great and everything's wonderful when really it's fallen apart. And sadness can give us the opportunity to build community with each other, but because we're afraid to show our sadness to each other, we're afraid to show our shortcomings to each other, we miss opportunities to build community. This is what it says in Romans. This is what Paul says. He says, rejoice with those who rejoice, but mourn with those who mourn. Paul understood there was a place for sadness, and he understood that mourning with those who mourn builds community. So does rejoicing with people who rejoice. It's not that I want you to come in here being sad. Don't hear that. I mean, next week, if every single one of you comes in here and is like, oh, I'm going to be like, I call cahoots, okay? I call cahoots on that because sometimes we're happy and sometimes we're sad, and that's okay. Rejoice with those who rejoice, but mourn with those who mourn, because it gives you an opportunity to build community. Sadness also gives us an opportunity to build a relationship with God. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. From the Beatitudes, from Jesus himself, he says, blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Not just by people around them, not just by their community, but by God himself. Sadness gives us an opportunity to build the relationship with God. And Psalms is such a great example of that, isn't it? It's such a beautiful example. All through the Psalms, you've got David and others who are just beyond sad and beyond broken and beyond mournful. But as they go along and they pour out their hearts to God and they're not afraid to show their true emotion to God, eventually that sadness turns to joy. Eventually that sadness turns to worship. Eventually that builds a relationship with God. And so did you realize there are 5 times in the scripture where God says, I'm going to turn sorrow to joy? It's God's business. That's the business that he does in our lives. That's the gospel, in fact, is God taking a situation that is sorrowful and turning it into something that is joyful. That's what God does. Without sadness, we can't really experience joy. I'm not building a case that we should all walk around with frowns on our face. Hear what I'm saying here, but I'm saying that God is in the business of turning sorrow to joy. And so sadness gives us an opportunity to build a relationship with God. But there's one more big thing. Revelation 21:4, because this is the promise. This is the ultimate turning sadness to joy. In Revelation 21, talking about when it's all said and done, this is what God is going to do. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore, for the former things have passed away. The ultimate sadness to joy is that one day we won't have any need for sadness. Sadness won't be in our control centers anymore. Sadness is going to be kicked out. And it is going to be joy. It's going to be joy upon joy. It's going to be perfect peace. It's going to be shalom. That is the hope. That is the dream. But for now, don't kick sadness out. Don't be like Melinda, stick sadness in this little circle and say, stay right there. You can't move. Don't touch anything. I don't want any part of you. Sadness is okay. It gives you an opportunity. It gives you an opportunity to find joy, to experience joy. It gives you an opportunity to build community, and it gives you the opportunity to build a relationship with God. So embrace it for now, and look forward to the day when it'll all be wiped away. Let's pray together.